You're listening to Sax in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sax in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at saxinthebasement.com. Dave and I are sitting at my bar. It's late.
Not that late.
It's late enough that we had to kick a priest out of the bar because he had to do mass in the morning.
Dude, that priest was. That priest would not have left.
One of the other podcasts I do is I do a podcast with a local Catholic priest who's a Navy chaplain and a former U.S. Marshal, who would rather after confession go and find the guy who did the crime and shoot him than anything else. He's the Wild West of priest. He's very entertaining. The name of the show is called Me and the Priest. But he was down here and he was hanging out and he was doing the show. Now, the wives are sitting down at the end of the bar. You can hear them in the background.
Right.
Chit-chatting. Your wife's like a conspiracy theorist.
Yes.
Who's still trying to solve JFK.
Yeah, no.
She's going to do it all on her own.
No, she's not.
I like her.
She's
I
not.
like the fact that she wants to do something, though. Look how much she cares about it. Don't you wish the White Sox front office cared so much about building a team?
That's a very interesting segue. So
I do my best to segue.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
That was very slick.
Yeah.
Very slick. I didn't see where you were going with this, but now I do. The Manny Machado fiasco was just starting to die down, right? And so a couple of days ago, Bryce Harper goes and signs with the Phillies for, 13 years, $330 million, okay? Now, the whole thing pretty much got resurrected. White Sox social media was taking a pounding on Twitter. On pretty much every social media site they have, just taking an absolute pounding for being a cheap organization. Kenny Williams, in his infinite wisdom, decides rather than just try to move on from this thing, shut up and go away and move on this thing, he decides he wants to come out and throw even more gasoline on the fire. And he talks to Daryl Van Schoen?
I think it's Schoen or Schoen,
something like that.
know.
In the Sun-Times, which I'll bring up about this in just a second. And he goes off on these whole comments of, we're not cheap. We offered Manny $250,000. All we had to do was stay healthy.
Things.
Yeah.
He could have been talking about us. He could have been talking about us because we said a lot of the things that he addressed.
And what was funny even about the Daryl Van Schoen article, even Daryl Van Schoen from the Sun-Times was contradicting Kenny Williams on everything that he was saying. Now, you can pretty much go ahead and Google the Sun-Times article to see just the ridiculous statements that Kenny Williams was making. All he had to do was shut up and go away, right? But he decided that he
can't
just
go away.
He's
He's like a moth to a flame.
Chris, he couldn't
can't help himself.
He couldn't help himself.
He is the most egotistical blowhard in Major League Baseball.
Now, rather than recap every part of that article, and by all means, if you want to, go ahead. No, I didn't think so either.
Because I don't even want to talk about him because to me, he's somebody who shouldn't have the job that he has and shouldn't be part of any major league organization at the highest level and should have lost his job years ago. And he's fortunate that he's employed by Jerry Reinsdorf, who doesn't like to fire people.
Right. Now,
Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't like to fire people.
Doesn't like to or is pretty much incapable of.
Think about it. The last time he really fired somebody for cause.
Tony La Russa.
He got rid of La Russa because he made the wrong decision. Let's never forget. He got rid of La Russa because he took Hawk Harrelson's side. I can't say it without laughing.
No, I know. It's a joke.
And then he has to get rid of Harrelson because it turns out he should have just kept La Russa and Harrelson was a problem.
Exactly.
Then he, in interviews after the World Series when he was feeling good about himself, and that's the thing. If you're a Sox fan our age or older, the younger Sox fans, I think, may have missed this with the 05 World Series.
Right.
In the glow that was after 05, in 06, he gave lots of interviews. And people would ask him questions like, what's your biggest mistake that you ever made? I should have never fired Tony La Russa.
I remember that.
I'll never make the mistake again of picking a general manager over a manager.
You sure about that?
And then, a couple years later, he held on to Kenny and let go Ozzie.
Yep.
Now, I know Only screwed that up. Only Guillen was the big problem with his big mouth. And Ozzie probably should have shut his kid up.
Ozzie Guillen wore out his welcome anyway.
But guess what? If you're going to get rid of anybody, if you wanted to get rid of Ozzie, Kenny should have gone too.
Yes.
Kenny was a huge problem in that. And he, again, chose the guy that was in upper management over the guy that was lower. And that has always been his problem as an owner. The guys that he sees on a regular basis, he has a very hard time firing them.
Now,
because these are the guys that he trusts, and to get rid of them would mean he might have to actually run the team for a week. And I don't think he knows what he's doing.
No, he doesn't.
So his thing is like, if I get rid of the general manager, who's going to tell the manager what to do until I get a new general manager? Somebody help me. And I think that's what happens. I think he likes it when somebody comes in and gives him the rosy picture. And I think he listens to the rosy picture, and as long as he's making money, he doesn't give a crap what else is going on.
Yeah, but
and he makes money every year.
Right, he makes money, but he doesn't make, as we've pointed out on the last podcast, he doesn't make anywhere near as much.
But
he's
he's pragmatic. He's a pragmatic businessman, and he makes his money pragmatically. And he goes, I don't need to take big risk as long as the paycheck keep coming in. Listen, the White Sox made a declaration, and it's been lost, I think, on a lot of people. But when you look at what happened with Machado, and you look at what happened now with Harper, and the fact that Harper took less money per year and just wanted length of contract, what the White Sox have said is, what Jerry Reinsdorf has said is, there is a limit to the amount of years I will commit to a player. And I believe, based upon the age of both of these players, and based upon the age of other free agents over the years, when you look back at it, Jerry Reinsdorf does not want to pay anybody once they're past 34 years of age. So if a free agent came out next year and he was 29 years old or 30 years old like Anthony Rendon, Jerry Reinsdorf would only be willing to give him a 4-year deal.
Right.
Because he doesn't believe in any value after that age. Now, sabermetrically, you would make the argument that he's right. And he is right. But the market is dictating that there's no way you can get a high talent guy unless you're going to pay for a couple bad years on the back end.
And that's true in every, Chris, that's true in every sport now.
But he's not
that's
willing
true
to
in
do
every
it.
sport.
He's not willing to do it.
I know that.
He's never going to do it.
Socks in the basement. Socks in the basement. Socks in the basement.
So let me just get back to, not to derail this, but let me just get back to this article for a little bit, because like I said, I don't want to. You guys who are listening to the podcast, you guys can go and Google this article and you can witness the absurdity for yourself. But there's a very key line in here. Like, as I was reading this in pure disgust, there's a line in here that literally made me almost throw up my lunch when I was eating at, Chipotle in Tinley Park a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of days ago.
That is the
actually,
most Southside thing I've ever heard you say in my life.
Well,
you've had about 4 or 5 rum drinks, and you're like, when I was eating at the Chipotle in Tinley Park, I almost threw up my lunch.
I'm trying to provide a
with
visual.
the passion and the fire.
I'm trying to provide a visual for you, Chris. This theater of the mind here, man. I'm trying to provide a visual. Speaking of theater of the mind, digest this comment from the ever-wise Kenny Williams. Okay, when making excuses, remember what I said about solutions, not excuses last week. Kenny's making excuses the whole time in this article. He says, and I quote, "Our fans would have been much more disappointed in our inability to keep this next core together.
That's not true.
We would have overextended ourselves had we gone to an uncomfortable level." Now, I have one simple question for everybody here. What in God's green earth core is he talking about? Is he talking about Tim Anderson, he of the most he's ever going to hit is 250 batting average?
About a core that isn't established.
Is he talking about Yoan Moncada, he of the 232 batting average?
He's trying to sell you on
Or is he talking? Wait a minute. Is he talking about a bunch of people that? Is he talking about he of Michael Kopech, who's had all of 13 major league innings and blew out his arm? What core are we talking about?
The worst thing that Kenny's doing right now is that he's talking to White Sox fans like they never met him before. This is a guy who never believed in prospects. He never believed in youth.
No, he would trade each and every one of these. He would trade each and every one of these prospects right now if he could get Ken Griffey Jr. out of retirement.
He never believed in youth, and he never believed in prospects. And now this same guy, after Rick Hahn somehow convinced Jerry Reinsdorf this was the way to go, this same guy is trying to sell Sox fans on a core group of players that are unproven that we don't know if they're going to be good or not. Look, Luis Robert could be good.
Sure.
Eloy Jimenez could be good.
Maybe.
Mike Rodolfo could be good.
Michael Kopech might be
Kopech
good.
could be good. I think he's going to be good.
We know that Tim Anderson is not good.
Nick Madrigal could be good.
We know that Yohan Moncada at
here's
this
the thing.
point is probably not going to be good.
Let's just talk about what the White Sox are trying to tell you is going to be the roster in 2 years. In 2 years, you have 2 catchers. You have a first baseman who should be Jose Abreu, but you know this team. They'll probably try to prove to you that they didn't get Yonder Alonso, okay, just to get Manny Machado.
And they're going to give him that 550 at bats.
They'll let Abreu go and keep Alonso. You watch.
Oh, my God.
That's what this team will do.
I would laugh
Oh my
so
God.
bad.
And then you get Madrigal at second, and you get Anderson at short, and you get Moncada at third, and you put Jimenez out in the outfield along with Mike Rodolfo and Luis Robert. And then you have a couple other guys that kind of come up that are like filling in the team. And then you got your 5 starters, Rodon, Kopech, Cease, Giolito, and Lopez. Okay? And a couple other guys that come up.
Right.
And what they're trying to tell you is that team is a 90-win team.
Wrong.
Now, here's the problem.
Wrong.
Not every prospect hits.
No, you're lucky if 1/3 of your prospects hit, Chris.
These guys are fun to watch in spring training and go crazy, but there's no guarantee. Let me tell you something right now. Eloy Jimenez is trying to come up right now in spring training, and people are clamoring for him. He's not doing anything right now at this point in spring training that impresses me.
Right.
He's going up against Major League pitching, and he looks average.
Major League pitching who's still getting tuned up and warmed up for the season.
I don't see him hitting bombs out all the time like he was on YouTube. You know, I think he's going to be a good player, but you're kidding yourself if you believe that just because a guy is a highly touted prospect, he's going to be good. The baseball world is littered with highly touted prospects
who
that aren't very good.
And when you're talking
the White
about,
Sox are trying to convince you as a fan base that all these guys are going to be good. They're not all going to be good.
No,
you have to make a move, and they're not going to do it.
And here's the thing, because since this happened, as you know, I've gotten into a couple of arguments on social media, which I shouldn't do because it's, it really doesn't help anything, and it's beneath me to be honest with you, but it happens. Can we make one thing clear right now? Can we stop, Chris, talking about, and I'm not saying you and I are doing it, but I'm talking, the White Sox brass, and I'm talking about the Sox fans who are buying into what the White Sox brass is telling me. Can we please stop talking about Yohan Moncada as if he is the second coming of Jose Altuve? Please, can we stop this? Can we stop talking about Tim Anderson as if he is the second coming of Nolan Arenado?
Listen,
because guess what? They're not.
White Sox
these
fans?
guys, Tim Anderson, Yohan Moncada, these guys, at best, you've seen 2 years of Tim Anderson. You've seen a year and a half, almost 2 years of Yohan Moncada cumulatively, okay? You know what?
I think you're being a little harder on Moncada.
They're just, yeah, but you know what?
You really only got one full season of Moncada.
They're just
you can't count the Red Sox stuff because of the way that they brought him up at the time that they brought him up was reckless. I still think you've only got 1 year.
We'll circle back on.
All
All
Yohan Moncada is, if you're lucky,
he's a guy.
If you're lucky, he's a 290 hitting third baseman and hits 25 home runs.
Maybe
that's it.
But even that, dude,
he's better than Yomer Sanchez. But I don't even know if he's on a World Series team.
But you know what? Jose Altuve, he is not. Okay, no. Tim Anderson, he's not Nolan Arenado. Go look at the stats of Altuve and Arenado after the same amount of at-bats that Anderson and Moncada have. The stats aren't even close. So can we please stop talking about, first of all, White Sox brass? We don't believe a thing they're saying of, we're going to need all these millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars.
No, because it's not going to cost that much to keep these guys.
So we can sign these guys. No. Because you know what? They're not going to be worth Nolan Arenado or Jose Altuve money because they're not that quality of player.
This is how baseball works.
And the problem is,
this is how baseball works.
The problem is I'm getting a lot of White Sox fans that are believing it. They're like, we don't need Manny Machado. We don't need Bryce Harper.
We
have Yohan Moncada. We have Tim Anderson.
Listen.
Stop it.
This is how baseball works. How baseball really works is you build a base, but then you have to be ready to make a move to bring in somebody that's going to help your base. Now, I could sit here right now and tell you, well, we haven't really gotten our base, so don't panic. But what makes me nervous as a White Sox fan is you see other teams now that are realizing we need to lock up these guys before they even get to free agency. And I don't think your free agency pool is going to be as deep as you thought it was going to be. The market is changing. Just like-
Especially seeing as how the Machado Harper thing played out over this free agency season.
Just like market always corrects itself. And the market is correcting itself now. And whereas you may have been ahead of the curve with the idea of stockpiling pitching, which is what he was doing in his rebuild, I thought it was smart what they were doing. But we're seeing a pivot now by the market. And the Sox have to adjust. And I'm not saying it's impossible for them to adjust. But what scares me is the way that they're acting right now. If they came out and said, we messed up, we'll do better, I'd feel better about this.
Like all of the other teams that I mentioned last week have done.
Justifying what they did makes me scared that they don't want to accept that the market is changing, that free agents are not going to be as plentiful as they were, that teams are going to sign stars, that they may now have to look at the possibility of, we may need to, think about this, we may need to trade a couple of prospects now for a player that is 18 months away from free agency in the middle of the season.
Right.
That we can get a contract done with before he hits free agency. That may be the new, because you always have to find the thing that other teams aren't doing.
That's a tough thing to buy, man, because number one, again, like you said, how many of these prospects are actually going to work out? Number one. Number two, are the White Sox even going to be able to get such a contract
But are
done?
teams still in love with prospects? You always have to look for the market inequalities. And that's what baseball has always been. The reason sabermetrics worked and the reason the whole thing with Moneyball and everything else was because it was discovered that there were people who weren't valuing players for what they were. And somebody figured that out. And then it was applied by Billy Beane first. And then the Red Sox did it to win a world championship. And and now everybody does it, right? So now everybody's working with WAR and B WAR and F WAR.
Not the White Sox.
No, even they are trying to evaluate guys that way. They're not doing a great job, but they're doing it. But then the next thing was, okay, the next market inequality was if we trade away and we build a core and we get them young, we manipulate their service time, we bring them up. Then what we do is then we grab one or two big free agents and we win a World Series.
Well, yeah, that's
the
been
Cubs
the formula.
did it.
Yeah.
The Astros did it. It's been the formula, right?
Red Sox have done it.
And now what's happened is the market has shifted again. Because of the way that things are working, you either have to be willing to pay an exorbitant amount of money, which we were not able to do.
Clearly.
We're not capable of doing. And then what happened was, in just the last week, the market has readjusted itself. You have all kinds of guys who are going to be free agents in 2020 who are no longer going to be free agents
because they're signing now.
Their teams are signing them now. The market is shifting. Are they going to adjust, or are we going to be a team full of prospects and nothing else? And that's frightening because here's the thing. I have two different schools of thought. On one hand, I give Rick Hahn credit for getting what he got for Adam Eaton. Okay?
Well, yeah.
And I give Rick Hahn credit for at least convincing the White Sox this was the way to go. But I can't give him credit for what he got for Chris Sale because for Chris Sale,
we haven't seen it yet.
You should be able to get great players, and I haven't seen a great player yet.
No.
Okay, I got one guy that looks like he's going to be a good pitcher to hurt himself, and I got another guy that played an entire year and hit 220. I haven't seen
average
it.
Defense at best.
And you should be able to get good prospects for Chris Sale, so there's nothing special about that. So on one hand, I see him as the guy who unfortunately has bad bosses. But I also see him as a guy that has done some things that I really liked and some things that I think anybody could do if they ran a fantasy baseball team once in their life. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
They could pull off that trade. And so now the real question is, can he adjust to the way the market has changed? Because now you have an Arenado, a Rendon that's probably going to get re-signed before he gets to free agency. You get a Miles Mikolas, you see, that gets re-signed by the Cardinals at the age of 30.
You can bet Mike Trout's getting re-signed easily.
I don't think they can re-sign him. I think he's going to come free. But when Mike Trout comes free, it'll be a big deal.
Yeah, and you ain't paying it.
And you're not going to get it.
The Sox ain't paying it.
No, because they're never going to give that.
No.
Because here's the thing. If you're a superstar, you know you're not going to be good at 38 years old. But you are like, somebody will pay me at 38 years old.
Yes.
To get my good years. And the White Sox are not willing to do that. So if you're not willing to do that, what do you do now?
Hey, this is Acoustic Mike from Broadcast Basement, and you're listening to Sox in the Basement with Chris and his buddy Dave. I did the broadcast basement with Chris for 10 years and nobody gave me a show. I'd leave if I had anything else to do with my life.
Remember, the Broadcast Basement is available everywhere podcasts can be found and always at broadcastbasement.com. Put yourself in Rick Hahn's shoes. Let's just say, without an opinion on Rick Hahn, tomorrow, Rick Hahn suddenly dies. And
Oh God, no.
yeah, no. And as he's dying, much like the movie Inner Space, where the scientist injects Randy Quaid into Rick Moranis' butt.
Was it Rick Moranis?
No,
in
it
Inner
wasn't Rick
Space?
Moranis.
You're
It
thinking
was,
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
No, who is it?
Martin
It was
Short.
Martin
It was
Short.
Martin Short.
Okay, so you're Martin Short, and now Dennis Quaid has been injected into your butt. See what I'm saying? And you now all of a sudden have to run the White Sox.
Yes.
I know it's a weird way to get to it, but I'm just trying to.
I'm with you. Go with this.
And your boss is Kenny Williams, and your owner is Jerry Reinsdorf, and you have this team. The question now is, what would you do? Knowing that you can only give so many years, knowing that you can only give so much money, knowing that the market is changing, and knowing what you have, what would you do? Because now it's time to pivot and find something else.
Well,
and that's the real question.
So
that's
here's
what
I'm gonna answer that question.
Have to figure out.
I'm gonna answer that question for you. The only thing he can do, Chris, the only thing he can do is have backup plans for prospects at pretty much every single position and hope that at least one of them or two of them turn out to be a superstar on the caliber of a Nolan Arenado or a Jose Altuve or a Manny Machado or somebody like that, because that is the only way you are going to get a player of that caliber. Then at that point, if you already have that superstar, that generational player from within, yeah, sure. Now you can go ahead and fill in the rest of the gaps with just regular, average, serviceable guys.
Well, here's the thing. I went and looked this up, and I looked up the notable free agents for the next couple of years and you don't even know if these guys will get re-signed. Okay. But what we have to do is we have to find guys that we think will be available and won't get re-signed by their team, and that you're going to be willing to spend the money in years. Okay. Okay. So the only catcher that's notable is Francisco Cervelli. And I think I'm willing to let the two prospects that we have play in 2020.
Yeah, before you go and get another catcher in the
Right.
mix, yeah.
First base is Goldschmidt and Abreu. I think you need to re-sign Abreu because you're going to get Abreu at a hometown discount, and that's the guy you want. And if you keep Alonso for next year, you're just cutting your nose off to spite your face because you're trying to prove. And Kenny
You're
would
trying
do
to
that.
prove a point.
Kenny
I know
would
he
do
would.
that.
I
Kenny
know he would
prove
do
a point
that.
to the fans by letting Abreu go and saying we always wanted Yonder Alonso, but that's not really true, and we all know it.
No.
Okay. Second base. This is brutal. Jonathan Shoup sucks.
God.
He sucks.
That's the top of the list?
Scooter Gennett. I like him. I like Scooter Gennett, but not enough. I mean, like, you could add him. I mean, like, right now,
I mean, again, that's a nice piece. I mean, that's a
he's
guy.
a piece, but that's what you're going to have to be now. You're going to have to be the Bears. Remember that's what Pace did. Pace just started adding pieces so that he got a little better, and all
yeah,
of a sudden
but even
broke through.
Pace went out and got you Khalil Mack.
Third base, Arenado. He's gone. He's been picked up basically. Yeah. Rendon is supposedly going to end up with the Washington Nationals again. They're going to try to sign him to an extension. Josh Donaldson, who's on a 1-year contract, prove-it deal out of
Every year.
So that's your guy. Donaldson now, I think he's going to be like 32 as your third baseman. So that's why Moncada is sitting at third, because guess who's your third baseman because they can't find another guy? It's Moncada.
Yeah.
Okay. Shortstop. Well, you can get two really good shortstops, but you would have to admit that Tim Anderson is not good enough.
Which they won't do.
You go get Xander Bogaerts or Didi Gregorius. I like Xander Bogaerts a lot.
Okay.
I really like him. I think he's going to be a 26-year-old superstar shortstop. He's the next guy you take a run at. But you're going to have to admit that Anderson's not your shortstop.
I don't think they can do that.
I don't
Chris.
think they can do that because they would have to admit that the guy that they drafted isn't good enough. But that's the whole thing. This is how this works. You build a base, and then you can't be afraid to break a few eggs to make an omelet. And they're afraid to do that. And that's what scares me about this team. Outfielders. We have a mess of outfielders. Out of Marcelo Zuna, Nicholas Castellanos, Yasiel Puig, Aaron Hicks, and Adam Eaton, None of them I think I would want to have instead of the guys that we're bringing up.
No, I would rather just take my chances with the guys that are up the pike.
Chris Davis and J.D. Martinez.
I have always,
not worried about him.
I have always said I am not worried about outfield depth from within because the White Sox have plenty of it.
In reality, the only real upgrade you can give your team is Josh Donaldson at third if Moncada completely flops,
Which we've already agreed we don't want.
or Didi or Xander at short.
Right.
Because you're gonna give Madrigal a chance. So you're not going to go get Scooter Gennett. So in reality, you're going to re-sign Abreu, and because there's not a lot out there next year. So there's no big guy coming in to boost your team.
No.
Next year's offseason is about to be as bleak as this year's offseason, which is frightening.
Well, unless the Sox actually make the smart move.
They're going to have to make
trades.
a trade. They have to start looking at trades because they're not going to get it in free agency. Now,
Well, there was a great trade that didn't happen, that almost happened, that you and I both loved when they were talking about, this was right around at Sox Fest, the name escapes me now, Jock Peterson.
yeah, and they didn't do it.
They didn't do it.
No.
And we both sat at the
That'd
bar.
have been a good deal.
And we both sat at the bar and they're like,
Well, they
wait a
can
minute.
go get Adam Jones right now, and Eloy looks up to him. He literally says in articles how he's one of the top 3 outfielders he's ever watched. You could bring in this guy to mentor a guy that you care that much about in Eloy, and it will only cost you $10 million, and you have all that money sitting around. Remember, you're going to spend it,
Right.
and you don't want to bring in Adam Jones. This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense why he's not on the team right now. Okay, now let's look at the next offseason.
So we're talking at the offseason between 2020
2020
and
to 2021, when you hope that they'll finally make a move.
Okay.
This is the next realistic moment where they make a move.
So this is
I'm just going to give you.
this is the plan according to Rick Hahn of 2020, 2021. We're going to be winning World Series.
Now you hope that a lot of these prospects have come along and they're good and it's time to fill holes. So if the catchers aren't any good, JT Realmuto's out there.
I don't think they're going to get him.
You better be ready to pay. First base, I still hope that you've kept Abreu because it's only Matt Carpenter who's going to be super old, CJ Cron who's not that good, Yuli Gurriel who's not that good, and Ryan Zimmerman who's going to be super old.
And
so that's why you have to keep Abreu.
And you have nothing coming up the pike at first base.
Nothing. Okay? Although
Like, from within.
Although a lot of people have told me that eventually Eloy will be a first baseman because he sucks at defense. That's a possibility.
Well,
He
okay.
could be the first baseman. Second base, if Madrigal doesn't work out, Starlin Castro,
Oh, my God.
excuse me while I barf, Jason Kipnis, and Cesar Hernandez.
God, how old is Kipnis now?
You better hope you find a second baseman in-house.
How old is Kipnis going to be in that year?
Like
That's got to be
57 years old.
35?
Right. Justin Turner is going to show up with his cane at third base,
Oh, boy.
along with Zach Cozart and Jake Lamb.
Mike Moustakas
Yeah.
is still going to be on one-year
Better
prove-it
find
deals.
a third baseman, okay?
Josh Donaldson will still be on a one-year prove-it deal.
Again, shortstop. If you could just figure out what to do with Tim Anderson, because again, it's another upgradable position, okay? Because guess what? Andrelton Simmons is a better shortstop than Tim Anderson, and Jurgensen Profar is a better shortstop than Tim Anderson, and they'll both be out there.
Well, and this is what I was saying before. Like the way that Kenny Williams and the White Sox are selling this is they are selling Tim Anderson. I said it before. They are selling Tim Anderson as the next second coming of Nolan Arenado. He's not. He's a guy. He's a
Okay.
250
and then
hitter.
in the outfield, you got Trout,
Not
Betts.
not happening.
Trout, Betts,
Not
Springer,
happening.
Cespedes, Peralta, Brantley, Peterson, Bradley Jr., Bruce, and Giancarlo Stanton if he opts out. I like half of them.
Yeah, there's some nice names there.
And there's some pitchers like DeGrom will come out, but he's going to be like 33 years old. Still going to be serviceable, but he's going to be on the old end. Okay, so now here's the thing. Looking at these lists, theoretically, if you had an infinite amount of money and you actually got these free agents, your best case scenario for this team is that you end up with JT Realmuto
as your catcher
for the 2021 season.
Okay.
Okay. And you're able to grab a Scooter Gennett at worst to be able to move around as a utility guy, and at best he's your second baseman if Madrigal doesn't work out.
Right.
Okay. And your shortstop, you can get Bogarts or Gregorius.
Than the previous year, but you have again.
you'd
you
have to make that
admit,
decision
you
now.
You have to admit that Tim Anderson is nothing more than what he is.
Nobody's waiting for you later on. See what I'm saying?
Right.
So those are the moves. The White Sox have to make, and you got to hold on to Abreu. So the White Sox have to decide we're keeping Abreu and spending the money. The White Sox have to decide we're going to go out and get a better shortstop, because if we're going to be lacking a third because there's no third baseman and Moncada's the guy, we have to upgrade somewhere, so it's got to be Anderson. As much as you like him, it's got to be Anderson. It's the only free agent that's going to be out there unless you start making trades. I mean, it's the writing's on the wall.
Right, I know that.
It's him. If you look at this like they're not people and you just look at this as moving parts, Tim Anderson's position at shortstop is the most upgradable position over the next couple of years in free agency.
See, I don't know. I mean,
and JT Realmuto at catcher.
I think you have a lot more potential to upgrade at third base or second base if Madrigal doesn't work out.
Okay, but
because again, we don't know about these two guys. We know at least what Tim Anderson is.
I'm just saying there's nobody really that you're going to get. What are you going to do? You're going to sign Josh Donaldson? You're going to sign him?
No, please.
You're going to put Justin Turner out there at 38 years old?
No.
You're going to put Zach Cozart or Jake Lamb out there?
What you mean by upgradable is what's available, not by what we need.
If I had to upgrade by free agents, you need Moncada to do well at third and Berger to come up and be good at third because there's nothing out there for you for the next couple of years because you missed on Manny Machado.
Right.
I mean, you are years away from a difference maker at that position unless you cultivate them or trade for them. This is not going well.
It's not going well.
2023, Alex Bregman. We just have to wait till that long.
Okay, hey man.
That long
okay.
for Alex Bregman.
Let's see, I'll be what, 45, 46?
Another show is wrapped up. Another show's in the books. Another show is wrapped up. And then by the looks, it's gonna be a good one. And we'll see you next week. And the nude is basement. And the nude is basement. Another show is wrapped up. Another show is wrapped up. Another show is wrapped up. And it's in the books. Another show is wrapped up. Another show is wrapped up. And by the looks, it's gonna be a good one. Nude is basement. Broadcast basement. The nudist basement. The broad basement. Slancha. That was like Dropkick Murphys or something, right? I felt like it.
Anyway, before we run out of time.
We are out of time.
Give me 30 seconds.
All right.
Just wanted to make a quick dedication, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
On this episode.
Yeah, I know.
So wanted to dedicate this episode to one of my dear friends and someone that Chris and I both went to high school with, Stephanie Tomlin. We just found out she passed away this week. And she was a huge White Sox fan, biggest White Sox fan you'd ever meet. Huge Paul Konerko fan. She used to go around referring to Paul Konerko as the future Mr. Stephanie Tomlin. So I just wanted personally
41 years old.
Yeah, 41 years old.
Passed away.
Just wanted to dedicate this episode to her.
And we're going to dedicate this one to Steph. And I want to say this too. And I was thinking about this today. I was laid up after a surgery last year. And I already had that show, The Broadcast Basement, but it was the only podcast I was doing.
Right.
And she started a fan page on Facebook called Diehard White Sox Fans.
Yes.
And you and I were on there, and we were on her page, but she started the page. And she's the admin who was in charge of the whole page. And myself and another guy were on there all the time commenting. And she said, hey, do you guys want to take it over? Because you guys probably pay attention to it more than me. And then we were all chit-chatting, and somebody said, you guys should do a podcast off
that page that she started was the impetus for this podcast.
That page is the reason this podcast is here. Because I had not considered doing one. And if she wouldn't have started that page, this show would not be here. This show would not be just one of the biggest things that you can get. I mean, I look at ratings. Like, there's a website, podbean.com. If you look at it, this show is the top White Sox podcast out there in terms of downloads. Now, podcasting is not an exact science, and I'm sure somebody else could find stats somewhere else, but we're clearly one of the biggest podcasts out there for the White Sox. And it's not by intent. It's just two friends that are sitting around talking.
Right.
But none of that happens without Stephanie starting that page. And to wake up this morning and see on Facebook that she had passed away. We were friends in high school, you and I and her. Brother Rice High School Marching Band. Yep. Okay, state-of-the-art grand champions in 1993 and 1995.
Yep.
It was rough news to take today, but we wanted to make sure that we dedicated the show to her. She was a huge White Sox fan, And she's one of those people that will sit there later on and say, it's a shame she only got to see one world championship. In 41 years, she got one world championship from this team, and she loved them every moment of her life. And that's why White Sox fans deserve better, because there's people like her who lived and died with this team, and they have to deal with this kind of disappointment. And they should be ashamed of themselves the way that they've been doing things lately.
Yeah, I agree.
Her dying pisses me off more about the White Sox. Like, I'm mad at the White Sox even more today because of the fact that she died with only one world championship. But thank God she at least got one.
Absolutely.
No credit to Kenny Williams. So, anyway.
So, thank you, Steph. We love you. And, yeah, that's all.
Let's do a shot and move on. All right.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.